Are you looking for help setting your lineup for Week 14 of your fantasy football season? Needing a boom play to make up points as you fight for that final playoff berth? Well, it's time for your Week 14 sleepers, streamers, and boom plays brought to you by RotoBaller.com. I'm your host, Anthony Aniano, as we take a look at some players, maybe a little under the radar, maybe they provide a safe landing spot, or maybe, just maybe, you're looking for that player who's going to explode on the scene this week in Week 14 of your fantasy football season. And we start at the quarterback position and take a look at Russell Wilson of the Denver Broncos against the Los Angeles Chargers. Russell Wilson averaging just over 18 fantasy points per game for the Denver Broncos on the year, with 21 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. And he's got a great matchup this week against that Chargers defense. The Chargers defense that allows 265.8 passing yards per game. They allow 23.5 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, 5 more than what Russell Wilson is averaging on the season. They've allowed 17 passing touchdowns. Russell Wilson has developed a terrific rapport with Cortland Sutton. Jerry Jeudy could be involved as well, obviously, in a must-win matchup for the Denver Broncos, who played tremendously better on defense and now have an opportunity on offense to exploit that Los Angeles Chargers defense. At the running back position, we start with my feature player of the week, and that's Keaton Mitchell of the Baltimore Ravens, the ultimate of the boom plays this week. Keaton Mitchell this week has a terrific, well, I shouldn't call it terrific, has a good matchup against the Los Angeles Rams. Okay, the Rams are allowing just over 111 rushing yards per game. However, they've only allowed 6 touchdowns in total to the running back position. Now, Keaton Mitchell, and the key here with Keaton Mitchell is the snap count. He's got 3 of his last 4 games, 10 or more fantasy points. And I still don't know if he gets the goal line work. That goal line work will remain with Gus Edwards. But the trend of the snap count, the trending snap count for Keaton Mitchell and the Baltimore Ravens, has Keaton Mitchell emerging more and more as the RB1 on that Ravens team. Week 11, Gus Edwards, 38% snap share. Justice Hill, 26% snap share. And Keaton Mitchell, a 36% snap share. So he's kind of even with Gus Edwards, a little bit ahead of Justice Hill. In Week 12, now remember, the Ravens were on a bye last week, Week 13. Week 12, Gus Edwards' snap share goes down 11% to 27%. Justice Hill kind of stays even, 26 to 28%. However, Keaton Mitchell jumps 10% from 36 to 46%. The Ravens getting him involved in more and more packages. We know the big playability Keaton Mitchell has. We saw it. That's why he became a waiver wire darling a few weeks back. His ability to run a 30, 40-yard playoff is Devin Achane-like, right? So Keaton Mitchell, expect that snap share to go over 50%, and with that big playability, it makes him the ultimate boom play for Week 14. Other running backs I like for this week, Week 14, A.J. Dillon of the Green Bay Packers. Under the assumption Aaron Jones remains out, A.J. Dillon is in a terrific spot against the New York Giants. Now, Dillon hasn't been great. He's been a safe 10-point kind of guy. He's got 10 fantasy points each of the last 3 games and is averaging 8.2 points per game on the season. Last week finished with 87 total yards, but he goes against the Giant defense that's allowing 136.1 rushing yards per game. They allow 24.1 PPR points per game to the running back position and a total of 13 touchdowns to running backs. 12 on the ground, 1 through the air. Christian Watson possibly not playing. Greater emphasis potentially to A.J. Dillon if Aaron Jones remains out with the knee injury. Another running back who could surprise this week, Dameon Pierce of the Houston Texans. Had a decent game yesterday, got in the end zone last week, I should say. 41 rushing yards on 15 carries and a touchdown, just over 10 fantasy points. But what's interesting is he had 15 carries. Devin Singletary, who had come off a couple of decent games, only 8 carries for 36 yards. Once Pierce was healthy, he took over the primary ball-carrying role for the Houston Texans. And the Texans this week, obviously without Tank Dell the rest of the way, and the Jets secondary being tough against the pass, but susceptible to the run, leads me to believe that Dameon Pierce has at least another opportunity to get into the end zone. Jets allow 136 rushing yards a game and 24.5 points per game to the running back position in PPR formats. They've allowed a total of 9 touchdowns this season to running backs, 5 on the ground, and 4 through the air. Now, if you're looking for wide receivers, maybe some sleeper, streamers, or boom plays at the wide receiver position, a boom play I like is Brandon Cooks now of the Dallas Cowboys. He's rostered everywhere, but this is a terrific week to start him as a wide receiver 3 or a flex option in what should be a fun matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. Brandon Cooks at this point has a touchdown in 3 out of his last 4 games with 15 or more fantasy points in those 3 games, averaging on the season just over 11 fantasy points a game, 11.3 to be exact. And he goes against the Philadelphia Eagles defense that allows more fantasy points to opposing wide receivers than any other team in the league, right? You saw Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk rip them up last week against the 49ers. They allow 47.7, almost 50 fantasy points a game to opposing wide receivers, the most in the league. 21 touchdowns this season allowed to the wide receiver position of their 27 passing touchdowns allowed in total. Like I said, 21 of them to wide receivers. Okay, Philadelphia allows an average of 260.3 passing yards per game. Obviously, Brandon Cooks plays, but CeeDee Lamb plays. Brandon Cooks is in lineups as well as somebody who could take advantage of that Eagles secondary. Another wide receiver to be mindful of is Romeo Doubs of the Green Bay Packers against the New York Giants. I'm operating under the assumption that Christian Watson's hamstring injury does keep him out in Week 14, and if it does, Romeo Doubs against the Giants is a terrific play. Last week, Doubs had one of his better games of the season. 5 targets, 4 catches, 72 yards. We know he's had a nose for the end zone this season with Jordan Love as he's averaging 11.5 fantasy points per game. The Giants allow 39.3 fantasy points per game. That's top 10 in most points allowed to opposing wide receivers. Okay, with 11 of their 14 passing touchdowns allowed to the wide receiver position. And finally, sleeper, streamer, and boom play at the tight end position, Gerald Everett of the Los Angeles Chargers. Okay, going up against the Denver Broncos. Last week, Gerald Everett goes 4 catches for 44 yards, 8.4 fantasy points. His last 2 games, he's averaged that 8.4 fantasy points. Did have a touchdown 2 weeks ago, but this week, Gerald Everett goes against a Broncos team that allows the most PPR points per game to the tight end position at 16.4 points per game allowed to tight ends. They've allowed 6 touchdowns to the tight end position, tied for the second most in the league. New Orleans Saints have allowed the most touchdowns to tight ends on the year with 7. Gerald Everett's kind of emerged as a pretty reliable target after Keenan Allen for the Chargers, as they've struggled to find that second receiver. Guyton, Quentin Johnson, Palmer got hurt. So Gerald Everett has emerged as a reliable option for Justin Herbert and that Chargers offense that has definitely struggled of late, but could be in a high-scoring event against the Denver Broncos. So to recap, my Week 14 sleepers, streamers, and boom plays: quarterback, Russell Wilson; running backs, Keaton Mitchell, A.J. Dillon, and Dameon Pierce. At the wide receiver position, I have Romeo Doubs and Brandon Cooks. And at the tight end position, Gerald Everett. Folks, don't forget, go to RotoBaller.com right now. Sign up for any of our premium passes now through New Year's and save at checkout using the promo code HOLIDAY and save 30% off any of our premium passes. That's the promo code HOLIDAY. Save 30%. Give me a follow on Twitter at Aniano Fantasy. Make sure you like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel and download the app. It's free. 6 great sports, all in the palm of your hand, season-long or DFS formats. Whatever you're looking for, RotoBaller.com has you covered. All right, everybody. As always, thanks for watching. Good luck this week, and we'll see you next time right here on RotoBaller Radio.